stops.
It will stop. So welcome. Thank you very much for coming here. This is our second interview now here at the festival, at the online edition of the Berlin Circus Festival. And we are very happy to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for the invitation. Yes.
Maybe you can introduce yourself just shortly.
So my name is Laura Hirvi and I'm the director of the Finnish Institute here in Berlin.
And I'm Hermann Lugan. I'm the director of the Bureau du Théâtre et de la Danse, the Office for Theatre and Dance for Performing Arts of the French Institute here in Germany.
And we have been working with both of you since basically several years. We always have the focus on a country every year, and in 2017 it was with Finland, and we had quite many Finnish artists here. And 2016 was with France and the French Institute, but we have been inviting many French companies, and you always supported us. Thank you very much for that. And we wanted to talk with you a bit because you have quite the wide perspective on, and you know the festival, you know circus, and you have quite the wide perspective on arts in general in these times. And obviously it has been quite an important question for us how to actually do a festival in these times. Now this is our maybe third or fourth plan that we actually realized. And we wanted to hear a bit about your perspectives and your experiences of art in Corona times, basically.
Maybe if I start, I think one of the things you already said is that this year was really marked first by cancellations. That was, I think, the first reaction that we had to quickly cancel all kind of events that would happen live. And the second step was postponement. I think it would have been, if Corona would have gone away, we would have had the most busiest fall ever. And I think that was the strategy which actually reveals how short-sighted we all were, right? So we all thought, it's just going to be half a year and then it's all over. And that was kind of, I think, the approach that many of us had. And the third strategy is kind of what is happening right now, is to go from the offline to the online. And I think there, at least that's our experience at the Institute, is that's what you have to do. I mean, you couldn't just sit and wait until the times go over. You really had to become creative, and the only thing was to go digital. But I think this is now the right moment to actually think for the future and reflect on what digital formats really work, and especially when we come to the question of performances. What can you do on Instagram live stories, for example? One thing is you just sit there and make the performance as it would be a stage, or you actually play with the camera and you plan and design from the beginning a performance so that you take advantage of the live moment, for example, that you have.
Exactly. And before we come to you, I think just as a quick answer, because it's such an important question of how to go digital and what do you want to also put online? Because we realize we don't want to put just performing arts and ready-made performances that are made for stage with audience and film them. But what kind of formats could be there? So it would be a question for after that also, what kind of experiences you had or what you witnessed, what kind of formats?
Yes, I must say I'm asking myself a lot of questions, so I'm not very clear about what I have to say on that today. I understand what Laura just said, and I wouldn't say that going digital is what you have to do. I think it's one of the possibilities right now. I also think that the experience or what we are realizing now is that this crisis may last for more months, even years probably, because it will last some time before everyone has this vaccine. And I just heard this Christian Drosten this week who was saying that maybe even next summer we will have only the people who are at risk who will have this vaccine, and then the pandemic will really start, because in fact all the people who or all these measures that are now at stake will be difficult to hold on a longer term, and then all the younger people will get infected, and that which then will have a problem. So in fact, I don't know if that's true, but the perspective is that this crisis will last. And I think what is just happening right now in France, for example, is that I think there has to be a democratic debate about what parts of the social life we want to keep alive or open again, because there were some choices that were made even when the pandemic was not as strong as it is now. And for example, in France, they just opened, they're in the process of opening everything again, but theaters and cultural venues are closed. So there is this impression that there is a clear social choice or political choice that this is not relevant or not important. And I think as the situation will last, or my question right now is, can we have a democratic debate, or is our society ready to maybe choose to open cultural venues instead of some of the big malls or something? Of course, this is an important debate, because for me, my experience with digital formats is, I must admit, I couldn't watch one whole show on screen. I mean, when you're on a screen, you always start watching something else at some point. So for me, of course, maybe it's because I'm too old and I spent too long watching shows in theaters, but I'm really not convinced about digital formats for now. But I know that some people, there is a French artist called Marion Sieffert who did a show for Instagram called Jeanne d'Arc. It has nothing to do with Jeanne d'Arc, but it was really made for Instagram and interacting with people on Instagram. And this was quite interesting. But is it still performing arts? Is it? I'm missing this physical contact, and I mean I'm in general missing this physical contact, and that's my first approach.
I totally understand. I mean, we do in an online version, but actually I would like more like to do a real version. I'm not so much into online the stuff, so I totally understand. I think we already had some, like also here moments when the artist was on stage, like it was so strange because they played in front of nobody, but still we have to find, and I don't know, like in this case we gave them just the space, the feedback we got from them, it helped so much. So we have a lot of programs here. Which programs do you have in your countries for like helping artists? Is there maybe other ideas than we have here in Germany? Or what do you think what should happen to help artists?
I think in a way, at least in Finland, it's quite similar the situation than in Germany, that the state stepped in and there was a quick reaction to get some additional funding, basically. And in Finland, we have a strong basis of foundations who are also always very generous and very important, actually, in supporting the cultural scene in Finland. They also got some extra funds out, basically. But what I see the problem, and I think this is very particular now when talking especially about performance art, that there are many, and then talking about contemporary circus artists, I mean, like, there is nothing, as far as I know, at least not in Finland and not in Germany, of a state contemporary circus group, you know, that would have an infrastructure, an institution. And we as an institution, for example, in our case, we didn't have to be afraid that we would lose money this year. And even for next year, I think, you know, there will be the normal support. But the question, I think the big question we are asking ourselves is how can we channel the money so that it goes to the artists, performing artists, who are right now not able to perform and thus don't have an income. And this is why we, for example, developed a concept of living room live at the Instagram stories, just as a reaction to show to the artists whose performances had been cancelled in Germany, that we are there, you know, and we now find a new mode of how can we pay for, you know, like your performance by giving you the rights to our Instagram account and then doing the performance there. And you initially asked about our experiences, and I agree. I think we all agree, you know, Berlin Circus Festival, live or digital. I mean, we all, you know, missed the summer with you guys. So that's, but it doesn't have to be, of course, always this either or question. But in this case, right now, there is not really an option for performance art. And there was one performance, one dancer, she worked together with her own film person, a cameraman, and with their own sound and light artist. And she had really rehearsed this performance, this dance performance of hers with the camera. And she knew exactly how you had to film that I'm sitting on my living room couch, that I would be actually, you know, addicted to watching the story to see what happens next. And I had this kind of experience that you don't have maybe in a live moment. At one point I was not sure where is up and where is down, where's her head and what is she actually doing. And it was a complete mesmerizing experience. And she really took this very serious, this challenge. And that was a project where I thought for next year it would be nice to continue the collaboration with her and look how can we test, you know, the limits and the possibilities of, let's say, Instagram Live and understand it as an own device, as you would understand the stage here.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I agree. You don't have to say either one or the other. I'm just pointing one thing is that I think that if the performing arts scene or just fits in the way the system or the politicians want it right now, then maybe we will have to wait till the end of the crisis, and that may be in very long time, in fact, to open theaters, venues again. So if I think if we don't push forward some kind of debate about what is important for our society, and then I think we may miss something, and also at the end, I think a lot of people who are struggling to continue working as artists will have to do something else to survive at some point. And coming back to your question about what was done in France, I think, in fact, I'm quite interested by what happened in Germany, because I think that there was a very quick reaction and not so bureaucratic, and all this, and also the fact that the state said gave to these professional organizations that are in between the professionals and the state, and they gave them the money because they know what to do. And I think that's something that didn't happen at all in France, because France is such a central state and everything has to be held by the administration. And in fact, I know that there are a lot of difficulties. On the other hand, in France, there is a very good social system, because a lot of performing artists are this intermittent du spectacle, so they have this social security. And this was postponed for a year, so the artists don't have to prove that they have been working for the next year. So that will keep them alive in a way. But I think all this creativity that has been in the cultural politics in Germany is quite interesting. I think this possibility to apply for funds just for research without any production goal and so on, I think is quite. I thought it was interesting and very positive.
I mean, it's a weird situation, no? Like now artists try to find ways how to present themselves online, and if the crisis is over, nobody will watch any movie online anymore because the people just want to go in theaters. So that's I wonder how it will infect art and
yeah, but I'm not so sure about that because we talked about before Corona, what was the big topic? Climate crisis. And we all thought about, like how can we change our behavior? And also we in the art world, and the art and cultural world, we thought of like how can we make it more sustainable what we are actually doing. And for us, bringing people together or, kind of bringing people together, I think is the best example. So that meant we have to fly people from A to B. And one format that, for example, we realized that's now not from the cultural scene, but more in general of bringing people together, these kind of talk formats. We had last week a talk where the moderator was sitting in Vienna and the two others who were talking to each other with each other were sitting in Helsinki in two different offices, and we as the organizers were in Berlin. And usually when we make a talk like that, if we get 40 people, that's a lot. And we had 130 people registered, I think 180, 130 showed up in the end, and they really listened from the beginning to the end. And I think that was, something that for sure we take with us to the future. So I think this is kind of like what I'm saying is like there are many, interlinks between, let's say, our issue with climate change and what can the digital actually offer. And I think there is this kind of concern I'm wanting to put here. We don't have to always take something good out of it, but we are now in this situation and we learned a lot, I think, to be very patient on the one hand, but at the same time, we learned to be very quickly creative and just testing things. And what worked? I think that's the question, and what might survive this moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, there are things like this talks and conferences, and it even opens. I think I also was part of some discussions with people from the other side of the world or from the countries who are from the poorer countries, with people who normally never get to this kind of talks. In fact, so that's positive. About art online, what we saw in March, from March to June, is that there was a lot of institutions wanted artists to give them films about what they did, and there was this big pressure, I think, for a lot of people to offer things because otherwise it didn't exist anymore. And what we saw is that a lot of art films or films of shows got online without any money, there is no economical model for that. And I had not very long ago I had a talk with a colleague somewhere in South America who was very happy because he did a music festival online. It's from the French Institute, and I said, but how did you do it? Did you pay the artists for that? And he said, no. What I did is that people were watching the film, and at the same time they could click and put some money on this live. So I said, so what you're reinventing, in fact, is the artist playing in front of the crowd with a hat, and is that what the future we as institution, as state institution, want to support?
But did it work? I think that's the interesting question. I mean, like, do you know the end of the story? Did the people click?
No, I know that some. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the figures because, in fact, he told that's always things about with new things. You think about it afterwards and say, but in fact that's the model of the hat, and so I should ask him if the artist got. I don't know if he knows it himself because the money went directly to the artist But so that's, for me, it's one of the big concerns, I think, about how because what we also realize, because for example I'm organizing cross residencies in the field of dance with a place in Potsdam, Fabrik Potsdam, and a place in Italy and a place in France. And in August there were 3 artists in residency, and normally we take people who go to Tanz im August here in Berlin, and we bring them to Potsdam to see a showing of the residency. And as Tanz im August was cancelled, we couldn't do that. Nobody was in Berlin to see it. So we decided to film it. But in fact, before we had a budget to take people with a bus and make a good meal and something. And now we decided to film it in a professional way. And in fact, it was much more expensive to film it in a professional way. And at the end, we had maybe 150 people who looked in. So it seems good. But if we looked closely at the time people really spent on watching at the artists, I'm not sure that the average was so good. And but we're experimenting and we're trying to do things. And but of course, right now we can't do much more than trying those things. But I think we should also be. My concern when I see what is happening in Germany right now is that it seems everybody is accepting things like they are. And I mean, as long as everything is closed, like it's now, you can understand it. But then, how will artists and the cultural scene also fight for themselves to exist in a situation that may last? That is my concern right now. And
we not accept.
I think it's a little bit like a split moment. I have the feeling of really either going digital completely, and I realize also, me personally, I'm also at the border of being comfortable enough in the digital world and also too new to really be home there. So yes, you have to reinvent yourself, but you're also going into territory that's unknown, where you're not really so familiar with. And at the same time, I also feel that it's a little bit tainted, because I feel exactly there's sometimes the need of this democratic discussion about that it cannot be just you have to go digital, because there are too many companies also who cannot do that, or festivals. And we have been thinking also about this aspect of maybe just showing an empty stage, being entirely online but only empty. But then again, you're missing out on the possibilities of what there should be could be done, and that maybe we are not the ones to entirely fill it with content. So we had this open call digitally to ask digital projects made in 2020 to see what kind of circus artists did what projects to go into the digital world. And there was one beautiful one of two artists being in different places, and they cut the video together, and they always stepped into doors and changed places. And or another one, they filmed the entire show, and every scene was filmed, so 5 minutes only. And at the end it was in YouTube, and in the end, you as a viewer, you could choose which scene you want to see next. But it would still continue working as a show. So I do think there are quite interesting formats coming up.
We had maybe a link to that. We had an open call Together Alone that we launched with the other 16 Finnish institutes. And because we're so, small, I think, I'm not sure how many institutes you have in the world, but we have 17. So if there's an idea, we just make a quick Zoom call, and when the crisis hit, we were like, okay, we need to do something. We had this Together Alone call, and we got, I think, over 400 applications. We chose 20 that got a project. And one project was, for example, a dance project that was filmed in Germany, Finland, and the music was actually done in Turkey. So it was really interesting to see it all come together. But what happened then, when they were ready and it was summer and we were freed of the lockdown, we had exactly this question of, okay, how many videos are actually online there, and how many people watch it really, and what could we do? And then we had the idea to bring it actually to Helsinki, to one of these advertisement screens. So we booked the advertisement screen in front of Music Hall, and it was a funny conversations I had with this advertisement until I could explain them what we want and the technical side, and then it's not a clip of 3 seconds, that we really want 1 hour, in a row, these 4 kind of clips. But I think that's the point. So we knew being outside is safe, like people can keep distance, so that's a good thing. These screens are not used right now in the same way, and sometimes we get good reductions. And we brought the content to the people who were just passing by, basically. And I thought that, like with these kind of screens, for example, of bringing the content to audiences that otherwise this would not necessarily even end up in your tent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can see you're quite optimistic, like in.
Yeah, somebody has to be.
But
I like
still,
to take
and I have
that.
to know, because you was talking about it. How is it institutional wise, like for little theaters in Finland, for like people who really need the people come in their places. Also, like the festival, you usually would need them.
Yeah.
So
I talked with one of your colleagues, with Rico from Circo, before we had this discussion today, because I asked him this question. And he said in the beginning, everybody saw it as an opportunity to clean up their websites and to, kind of like work on a new project and to come up with new ideas. And then he said, but after a while, that was all done, and you were still sitting in your own home and not really going out to perform. And then, so he said, this is now a crucial point or a moment where you can feel that now needs to happen something. And I think this is what you said before, this question of like what value, or in German, welche Stellung hat Kultur? Also what kind of, like, how important is it for us, culture basically, and keeping up and open the museums or theaters. And I think this, I agree. I mean, like, that's a discussion, and it's especially this discussion, let's say KDW has to be crazy, I think, or was crazy the last month. Yeah, and I mean, like, and then you're like, but no, museums, like, we can't open them. And you're like, okay,
Yeah, especially we planned a winter edition already, like, which we just canceled. Like, we canceled the summer, then we planned a winter edition. And like, we had planning and hygiene concepts for ages, and like I'm still convinced they're good, but when you go to IKEA or in the supermarket and you think, what the hell?
Exactly.
So, and I found there's like a little problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can just tell. This morning, the French cultural minister, she was on the radio, and she was justifying the fact that the theaters are closed because she's saying that because of the movement of people in the society. And she said because of cultural structures, there are 40,000 people outside in Paris every evening. So the first reaction was, when you know that there are 43 million, there are statistics, there are 43 million movements of people in France every day. So it's 40,000. And then it's a reality in Paris, which is a very dense city, where people are very close to each other. But then you have different realities in smaller cities outside and so on. And so, in a way, these figures could be seen the other way around and say, do we agree to have these 40,000 people moving? Because we think, of course, if it's always the same 40,000 people, that's also a question, of course, we have a problem. But or do we prefer, people to go to the shopping malls, which is just happening right now in France.
And shopping you can really do online in many places.
Yeah.
Seriously, this is a difference, at least living in Berlin in the 5th floor without an elevator, we are really experts on online shopping. And I think this is something I'm not missing. I mean, I really try to avoid all the shops. And here we come to the point, this will perhaps last, but consuming cultural content digitally, as we agreed, is not the same. And one of the things I think, again, I totally agree in that regard, there should be more discussion on what could be possible, in the next even light lockdown. And one idea from the museum side was bring in the kids, the school classes, because school classes are right now just one group, and they are just anyways like these, let's say 30 people, and it rather, instead of doing nothing, make a circus festival for all the kids who come always in their group and cohorts, and then you would have a very traceable kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a festival, Perspective, also in Saarbrück, and they have another festival for children, for young public. And I was so surprised to hear of them that they actually planned with theaters filled with 400 people. But exactly that point, it was all classes, school classes, who then sit in small groups. Or the question of the very hard lockdown in France, when it was with a curfew as well, that nobody was actually allowed to go outside without the paper in certain areas. And the idea as well, how about if you provide your ticket to a show? Because you go to one place specifically, you know exactly, it's very traceable who will be there. So there are very clear concepts, and these, I find the thought of the number of people moving for culture in some way like very interesting to hear, some way also very encouraging to know that there is a big number, of course, of people moving. And yeah, I personally really wonder how to combine all this, because there were many experiences also of this going digital regarding meetings or regarding exchange, regarding funding also, because now in Berlin or Germany there's this, they just released today the results of the first ever funding for circus, actually, for circus and creation. By the Fonds der Kunst, and they had the Take Action format, which will in the end fund around 40 or 50 circus projects within this next upcoming year. Is a unique step that never happened and is historic, basically.
Because of Corona, and this is weird.
Because of Corona?
Yeah, because it's a Corona film.
It's a
There are 50 creations.
Yeah.
And it's basically really this transitioning and transforming, and seeing that many of these artists are still aiming for something analog. And it will definitely become a question.
I think because you were also optimistic about, like audiences will come back after, like there will be the live moment. But now putting in a critical note on that, what some people were saying, and again, I'm, relating to what happened to me. I was never a big consumer of anything like Netflix or something like that. But if you're at home for, I don't know how many months we've been now really trapped in the apartment, you start becoming used to those kind of consuming. And I think there had been already in the beginning, some voices that were saying like, what happens if consumers are, getting used to, I don't need to go to the theater or to the orchestra. And of course you will get always your hardcore lovers, they will come, but what about those others who were always in between? Will you get them from their couch to come and visit?
But there's always the aspect of really the physical contact and the real exchange that we could observe a bit with artists coming here for the residency for 2 days only, which is very short time, but how much they actually enjoyed the moment of being on stage and having, even if it's a very small audience of only the team spread out, but to actually be able to perform, and if it's only for one person even, but just to have this real contact. And we as a team could really appreciate as well the moment of watching something. And it is then going to this question of winning new audiences and how to keep these audiences and so on. I think. Sorry,
I have to laugh because like our sound chief of director, whatever, he's sitting there, and we're having fire because people passing by. We have airplanes, helicopters, and now we have rain. So it's horrible to do any sound.
That's the life thing, If we would be sitting all in our studios, that would not happen. But now, that's the charm of the life.
You're almost crying, huh?
We try to scream, that you can hear us.
I think we have one more question for you. We are asking this all the artists, and maybe we would transform it a little bit as in regarding your different countries. What is your perspective or your take on circus in Finland and in France?
The perspective we have on circus, you mean, in general? Or?
Yeah, it's on purpose keeping a bit abstract, because it's a perspective, it's a situation, and it's not an analysis. It's more maybe the circus now in these times. And
yeah, I mean, in France there is a long history about the institutionalization and the support of contemporary circus that started more than 40 years ago, I think, right now. And I think that there is still the will there to support it and to make it grow. There are a lot of also a lot of cultural centers who produce contemporary circus, who open themselves to a lot of crossing with other disciplines, and also with digital inputs, but also with choreographers or people from other fields. And I think the production goes on. The question is what will happen when it will. I'm afraid of the length of the crisis. I must admit I'm not that optimistic if these things last too long. I think what you pointed, the fact that people will change their habits, and I even heard some cultural politicians in France saying, but do we need to open theaters and museums? That's not what the people do. They look at television, they look at Netflix. The thing is, it's really, for me, it's a question of democracy, because if you look at Netflix, there is a closed offer. It's a closed offer. And if you put on the 2 or 3 other platforms, it's still a closed offer. What art makes possible is a diversity of point of views on the world, on the perspectives. So when and of course this can also happen online. But I think if there is, if we lose this political will of supporting a strong art community in the countries, and maybe the longer this crisis will last, the weaker this need will be on a political level. That's all my impression. So that people will say, well, I mean, society is working well without these people. That's. And for me, I mean, I can only say it from a very personal point of view. I haven't been dancing in a discotheque for 20 years, maybe, but I often have now this need. I want to go there. I mean, I need this physical contact. You know, this. Sometimes it's also this thing of smelling people. You know, I just crossed someone in the street and saying, she had he or she, I don't know, even had a nice perfume. And I said, oh, that's an experience I'm not making anymore, because we're all on this distance. And so I think I need to sit in a theater with people, even people stinking. I don't know, but it's like I have this need, this feeling, and so that's also something I like about circus. If I think of it right now, is that people sweating, people even sweating on me when I'm sitting in the first row. So, and that's an experience. I wish I have kids. I wish to give them the opportunity to have this experience, and not just to offer them this screen.
Absolutely. And I agree. I think now it's really the time to raise voices and to start some lobbying and to really think about, again, like the future, basically. And about your question of circus, I think there are other circus artists from Finland who could give a much better answer to it. But I can just say from my experience with contemporary circus in Finland, it is very rooted in society. I think I told you, my daughter, she's now 14 and she was 6 when she already did her first circus performance. And circus school was really, like the thing that, like soccer here in Germany, it was everybody went to the circus basically school. They were always booked out, and they were always around the corner. And the number of visitors to circles, they are always rising. And what I just learned right now, the funding system in Finland is now going to change a little bit. So now circus companies will have a chance to become part of the official structure and to get a more reliable funding. And that's the historical step, I think, in Finland that is happening now, to actually, like make it part of the cultural infrastructure of Finland.
Wow. These are good news. Yeah. Well, thank you. I think.
Is there any question from outside? We talked already a lot.
Yeah, then thank you very much for coming here and giving us a bit of your time.
Thank you, and all the best for the future. And I hope we'll see you under this tent, but
yeah, hopefully
live.
we can see the premiere of the movie next year together in the big top with a lot of people.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.